as well. So thank you for the opportunity, and back to you.
Over to you, Dan. Confirmation from Mr. Brown, Dan Brown.
Sorry, I was on mute.
Okay.
Apologize. I just wanted to, before I introduce the panelists, I want to send out this chat or this quote. You can see it here on the slide, just to think about as we go. But part of the problem is that we tend to think that equality is about treating everyone the same when it's not. It's about fairness. It's about equity of access. And now I can go ahead and introduce our panelists. So our first panelist is Miss Natalie Jack, Supervisory Mission Support Specialist, AFRC 434 MSG-CSS, Disability Program Manager, and DAF-BOG DAT. Next, we'll have Miss Rhiannon Brown, Developer Specialist, Best Co-Lead, DAT Outreach Lead, AETC Mentorship Council, DEIA Advocate, and then Mr. Sherman Anderson, Contractor Security Office supporting CDME Security. And this is what our panelists look like. You will get to see them on camera today, but we always like to throw this in here to let y'all see who they are. But they should be. Actually, I think Mr. Anderson was having some problems with his camera, but everybody else will be on camera today. And without further ado, I would like to turn it over to Miss Natalie Jack. Ma'am, it's over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Is my mic working?
Yes, it is. I can hear you loud and clear.
Excellent. All right. Thank you all very much. So I have gone down a little bit of a rabbit hole, as I was just telling Ms. Carmack about my notes, because this is such a broad topic and I'm so passionate about it. I struggle to just nail down some specifics. But I'm here to talk about supervision of individuals with disabilities. So equality, advanced management, obviously, is my topic. Are my slides available? There we go. Excellent. Thank you. So we're just going to start a little bit with the myths about disabled employees. They cost more. Slide. They often fail. Well, they fail to meet performance standards. Next. You always have to protect them, of course, always protect them. And next. They miss too much work and cost more in benefits. So obviously those are all myths. They're just misconceptions. And they're common misconceptions actually also. To say that disabled individual costs more, I would imagine that the majority of people are talking about accommodations, when in fact many accommodations don't cost anything. Supervisors who are aware of an individual who has a disability, they have many resources available to them in ways that they can actually support that individual without having to go into costly accommodations. Those that actually do have a financial investment involved generally cost less than $500. So the expense of supporting individuals with disabilities doesn't necessarily have to be huge. If you do have an accommodation, say you have a barrier that you need to overcome for an individual in a wheelchair, the Air Force has established a centralized fund to help agencies incur the cost of that barrier. It's the first, it came around last year. This is the second year we've had it. It's fantastic. It offers a lot of support and opportunity for agencies whose first answer is, we can't afford that. And I should also note that that's the way wrong answer. We should never actually look at cost as a barrier for supporting anyone with an individual. Individually, there's less absenteeism among individuals with disabilities, and they typically actually will perform at or above standard. And then when I say we need to protect them, individuals with disabilities don't necessarily need any more protection in terms of actually doing their job than anybody else does. We all need to be held to the same performance standard. It's just some of us may need a little bit more support than others to actually meet that standard. Next slide, please. So a few facts. As I said, lower absentee rates. Next slide. We have increased productivity. Next. Much lower turnover. And lastly, next slide. We actually offer a diverse and creative problem-solving opportunities for any team that we become a part of. And I say we because I'm an individual with a disability also. And I know that I'm talking to a lot of individuals in the audience right now who have disabilities themselves. And I think that creative and diverse problem-solving skills, when you have a disability, you actually have to approach life sometimes in a different manner, and you have to figure out ways on your own to accomplish what it is that you want to accomplish. And that in and itself actually will create diverse problem-solving skills. Next slide, please. So I thought a lot about whether to actually include percentages. And when I started looking at percentages, there are a lot of areas in the EEOC that have cases for discrimination. So when I looked at the national standard, and then when I looked at the Air Force totals, I could see that the numbers are a little bit different, but by and large, disability ranks above all other forms of discrimination. It's above race, sexual discrimination, religious discrimination, age discrimination. And these stats came from the FY22 DoD EEOC and the Air Force EEOC report cards. And when I looked at those, I was thinking, how am I going to tie this in, and what necessarily does that mean? For me, it means really one thing above all others, and that is what unites us is far greater than what divides us. Excuse me. No one is, wow, pardon me. I'm very passionate about this subject. No one is immune to the possibility of becoming disabled. Nature and life are biased. Nature and life don't see color or race. They don't see biases or stereotypes. And nature doesn't care about your sexual orientation or your gender. Are some of us predisposed to crippling illnesses? Yes, absolutely. Of course we are. However, this is one sobering fact, I think, even above the fact that disabilities rate higher in the discrimination factor than any other. And that is 1 in 4 individuals who are in their 20s today will become disabled before the age of 67. That's 25% of our young people will experience the possibility of becoming disabled before they're at the age that they could reach Social Security. Next slide, please. So this is the 50th anniversary of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. And when I think about those stats, all I can think is, where on earth would we be without that particular act? The first federal law to specifically address civil rights for people with disabilities. It really staggers me 50 years later to think of where we are. And for me personally, where would we be? I probably actually wouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now. So I had a stroke 6 years ago, and it was a cognitive stroke. I lost my ability to speak. I was a semester away from graduating college with a bachelor's degree in math and English to teach middle school education. I lost my ability to function at the higher level in math, so there went my ability to actually teach math. And because I'm actually reading slides, I may not stutter or mix my words up very much, but if an English teacher can't get her words out appropriately or put a sentence together, probably shouldn't be teaching 6th, 7th, or 8th graders. So that ended my educational opportunity. But I met my husband, got married, moved to Indiana, and, married the Air Force. So what happens when you marry the Air Force? You find a new family. So I did find a new family, and through the benefits of a hiring authority called Schedule A, I was able to actually find a job with the Air Force and promote within that job over the last 4 years to a supervisory position. So I'm speaking to you as an individual with multiple disabilities and an individual as a supervisor. So it gives me a little bit of a unique perspective when I start thinking about my team and how I relate to my team and how I manage my team. Next slide, please. So why did I say that equality is advanced management? I mean, there's a lot of reasons why equality is advanced management when you're thinking about the supervisory world. But when you're thinking about it from the perspective of, and I just want to interject really quick, if I'm running long, someone please put their hand up and let me know that I'm done talking so I don't cut into anyone else's time. But advanced management, you have to be sensitive to your team members as a supervisor across the board. And that's just in general. You have to take their personalities into consideration and their learning styles into consideration. But when you're thinking about supervising individuals with disabilities, you need to work hard to cultivate a supportive environment for everyone. It's not just come to work and do your job and then go home and you don't think about it anymore. It's really listening to how your team is talking to you. It's not only listening to the words that they're saying, but it's listening to the intent and potentially the emotion behind it. A lot of individuals with disabilities, and I'm one of them, I'm very, very sensitive to my disability because, number one, I'm from Eastern Kentucky. I don't know if you all can tell whether or not my accent's coming out, but my accent's kind of got a hick accent to it. And then when I stumble over my words and I try to say he and I say she, or if I try to say cabinet and I say refrigerator, then in my estimation, I feel like that I'm not very well educated. And as a supervisor working with key leadership, if I'm standing up and briefing a crowd and I can't get my words out, that's very personal for me and it's very sensitive. And I don't like to talk about it very much. However, here I am sharing it with everyone because we learn by sharing our stories. And I feel like that if sharing my story makes one person find their voice to stand up and say, hey, I'm here, I need help, please help me, then I'll share my story all day long. But getting back to supervision, we need to understand that not all individuals with disabilities have physical and visible disabilities. I'm one of them. I have what's called a hidden disability. So if you all didn't know, none of one knew me before I had my stroke, but if you knew me prior to and you know me now, you can see the differences. But as I'm speaking to you here today, I look like just an average, ordinary individual who has a passion for supporting people with disabilities. So that's probably my overreaching message is know your team, pay attention to your team, and just take what they give you and think about that when you go home and replay that and think about your inclusion and think about your equality and think about whether you're actually listening with a sensitive ear versus just hearing what they're saying. Next slide, please. So how do we support people with disabilities? As I mentioned, I'm a Schedule A hire. The Schedule A is a special authority for individuals with disabilities that will get you noticed when ordinarily your resume wouldn't be noticed. So when you're applying through USA Jobs, they're looking for the top talent pool of those resumes. And Schedule A individual may not necessarily have a resume that reaches that top talent pool. So for Schedule A, you just need to be minimally qualified. And when I say just need to be, you need to be minimally qualified for the job in order to get your resume seen by a hiring manager. And there's a lot of ins and outs to that. And anybody who wants to ask questions about that, I will talk about that all day long. But it does help you get your resume seen. The second is 30% veterans and wounded warriors. Paying attention to that area of the population and leveraging their talents to bring them into your team. Supporting them second is prioritizing accommodations. Find out who your disability manager is. If you don't have one at your installation, MatchCom has one for you, and all of these are all linked on this slide for anyone who wants them. But get to know them, ask questions. If you're not really sure how to support an individual, contact your DPM or talk to your civilian personnel office and just say, I know this individual has a disability. They've told me that they do. What can I do? The other thing that we can do is encourage self-identification, and that is filling out the SF-256, which you can find in My Biz. And the question I get all the time is, why should I self-declare I have a disability? I don't want anyone to know. Well, the SF-256 is anonymous. You know it, and there is potential that maybe your civilian personnel will know it depending on how you hired in. However, what that will do is add you to the statistics of the Air Force. Are you a person with a disability? Are you a person with a specific targeted disability? That helps the Air Force know where our numbers are when we start thinking about money and reasonable accommodations. So encourage everyone to fill that out. You can change it at any time. If your disability changes, you can go into My Biz, you can update it, and then you're good to go. And then again, like I've said, cultivate your supportive environment. Not all disabilities are visible. Not all disabilities are the same. Never assume anything about an individual. Never assume that their work performance is just lazy, poor work performance. There may be something else going on. The one thing that you can't do is ask, but if you listen, I really think that you will probably hear what they're telling you. And then lastly, never be afraid of the candid conversation. Candid conversations will lead you in areas that you never really thought that you would discover before. And they will help you uncover tidbits and interesting information about your team that only builds that strong network of team building that everyone needs to be successful. And again, your candid conversations. I like to do icebreakers every week in my team meetings, and that icebreaker has told me a lot about my people. And it is a supportive and a safe environment for them to share. And then that's where you might start learning that you do have a team member with a disability and they're willing to share it. As soon as they're willing to share it and start talking about it, then you know how you can move forward as a supervisor and help support them and help them meet their successful goals. And with that, if you'll give me the next slide, please. This is my last slide. And as I was introduced, I am part of the DAT. I am the co-lead for the DAT along with Miss Tiffany Durnell and Mr. David Frank. Our outreach co-lead is Miss Rhiannon Brown. She's going to be one of the panel members here shortly. But all of our emails there are linked. We've got Facebook, we have YouTube, tons of ways that you can get in touch with us. And by all means, if you've got a passion for supporting individuals with disabilities, we're always looking for hardworking, talented people. It's all volunteer related. You are free to give as much or as little time as you need, and just come join the crowd, and you'll join in with a fantastic group of people. And with that, I thank you for your time. I don't know if I'm short or if I ran over, but if anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in chat and can address them a little bit later.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, ma'am. Great presentation, a lot of good information, and thank you so much for sharing your story. We do appreciate it. I personally know that it's not easy to do, so I do appreciate that. But without further ado, for time's sake, I will pass it over to Miss Brown. Miss Brown, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. As Mr. Brown said, I am Rhiannon Brown, otherwise known as Rhi, but I am trying to make the transition into my beautiful given name, which is Rhiannon, so feel free to address me as that. Next slide. So my presentation today is called A Zombie Life. And you will soon see why. But I'm going to talk about what it's like for me and my experience living with narcolepsy, which you may know is one of the invisible disabilities like Natalie was referencing. Next slide. Next. So just by way of the thumbs up feature in Teams, if you have heard of narcolepsy outside of knowing me, go ahead and give me a thumbs up real quick. All right, I saw 1, 2. All right, 3, 4, 5. This is amazing. All right, so now, have you seen it portrayed in the media? And I will caveat that with, do you think that its portrayal in the media was probably accurate to what it actually looks like? Thumbs up if you think it's probably accurate. All right, seeing none. I will say when I've seen it in the media, it's usually more of a farce to where someone will be talking and they'll just, go like that. Unfortunately, that's not entirely impossible. Now, the question of do you know anyone besides me who has it is important because there aren't actually many people who do have narcolepsy. It's actually really, really rare, considering and comparatively. So I won't read you the slides because I'm going to try to give my own information, but just know that I did include factual data throughout the slides because what I'm going to do is challenge you to a couple of things while I'm speaking. First of all, if you've ever met someone that you think might have narcolepsy, but they don't know they have narcolepsy, and I hope this empowers you to maybe have a conversation with them because you'll see a stat later. Most people go like 8 to 15 years with symptoms not realizing that that is in fact what is wrong. Next slide. The next challenge I will give to you is to open up your mind as far as Natalie mentioned, everyone's experience, especially with invisible disabilities, is different. And I'm going to go ahead and throw out there that this is my personal experience. As I explained to you what narcolepsy is, just in case you don't know or haven't heard of it, it is a neurological issue. And it says chronic there, mostly because it's not usually one of those one-off or intermittent things. It is an everyday, every minute type of situation that sufferers have to deal with. And there are generally two types, one with cataplexy, the second without. Most people have cataplexy, which I promise I will explain what that is. And just a couple of factual overviews. They don't think genetics play a really big role, as in it's not guaranteed my son will have it, but there are a lot of factors that are involved. That being said as well, most people, when they get diagnosed, are in their early to mid 20s, which is actually about when I found out. So, of course, I pray against my son having to deal with this condition that I have. But we each deal with what life gives us, right? So, the second part of that challenge I'll throw out there is if you see that you may suffer with some of the things that I'm going to talk about, or if you are a supervisor of folks who you might be even passively or accidentally judging them based on what you see, I invite you to do a little bit of research and maybe not ask, like Natalie said, but get to know your folks just to find out, just because so many people don't know they have it. Next slide. So this is just a quick overview of my particular symptoms. Just so you know, narcolepsy can look like a person who wears a helmet everywhere they go because they might indeed pass out at any given moment. It's a spectrum going all the way to that person who doesn't know they have it. They just think they're really tired. So I'm going to read you just a couple of definitions so that way when I get into my personal story, you'll hopefully have a better idea that narcolepsy is so much more than just being, quote, tired. So excessive daytime sleepiness is an irresistible urge to fall asleep. It's set at all times, but especially during monotonous situations. The severe drowsiness can cause lapse in attention and even sleep attacks, where you can indeed fall asleep without knowing that it's coming. Of course, this makes work hard, reading nearly impossible, and driving dangerous. The next one, the cataplexy, I will get a little bit more into, but just to give you a general idea of what that means, it's a sudden loss of muscle control. Again, the people with type 1 narcolepsy get that. And it can be triggered by a sudden emotional burst, like a sudden rush of happiness or a sudden rush of anger or any type of sudden emotional control your body seizes. And then you can collapse and fall out, or you can kind of slowly fall down. Um, and it can look like many other things. The hypnagogic hallucination, I will say this was one of the symptoms I didn't understand for a long time. And there is nothing scarier than combining a hallucination with a sleep paralysis when you are a perfectly healthy 20-something-year-old and suddenly you're lying in the bed, you are seeing things that you are for sure are real and you cannot move all at the same time. So if that gives you just a little bit of insight to what those two are, I will read you the definition right quick. For the hallucination, it is imagery or images and sensations that seem real and occur while you're falling asleep. These are not dreams, but they are experiences that happen in the interim of falling asleep and or waking up. And the problem when it comes with the paralysis, it can be very, very scary or very, very just disturbing in general because you don't know that it's not real. And it's not a nightmare either. It's a legitimate hallucination. And of course, the paralysis is pretty self-explanatory. It's when you can't move. So you might be aware mentally that you are awake, but you physically can't force your body to move. And it essentially comes down to there is a disconnect between what your body wants to do and what your brain wants to do. And you are kind of caught in the middle and you can't control either one. So now that I've given you a very general overview, next slide, of what narcolepsy can look like. These are in particular my symptoms. I'm going to give you my background and my story. I do apologize now if I get a little weepy. Each time I tell my story, I get a little less weepy. But because this is my reality, and I like for people to understand the why behind the me, I think while I am much more than my disability, because of its very nature, there's no cause, there's no cure, and medicine doesn't really help. It requires a lot of communication and boundary setting. So I am currently in my mid 40s. And I did have some childhood issues. For example, I went from being able to play games in the car. Of course, I was a kid in the 80s, so there wasn't, any type of tablet or anything. We did I Spy, things like that. But reading was just out of the question. I just assumed it's because I was in the car. Big deal, right? Fast forward through school, book reports and things like that. I was an A student, but I just couldn't get through the reading. And it wasn't that I didn't want to, it was that I couldn't. And I had to find ways to get around book reports and things like that. But I knew it wasn't a laziness issue. Fast forward to college, the symptoms, right? Full-time work, full-time school, full-time commute in SoCal, which is hours, sleeping only 4 hours a night, working out regularly. Of course, you're going to be tired all the time, right? Like, look at that schedule. It's normal to be sleepy. But then one day I fell asleep and I counted, I missed a lot of idiot dots, which is what my uncle called them, the da 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 on the freeway. And I woke up to that and I was like, oh, and I had no idea I had fallen asleep. Now, so far you're thinking, yeah, this sounds like pretty normal. That's the thing. It can be normal at times. What makes things like that not quote normal is when it's every day, all the time, not just when you have a reason to supposedly be sleepy. So the big wake up call for me was I once drove from Hollywood. I was leaving Universal Studios and I drove all the way to the base of Big Bear Mountain. Now you should know, if you don't know that area, I put the mileage on there. That is about, in the middle of the night, it's about an hour and some drive because there's always traffic in Southern California. And I can tell you there are 3 major freeways, in fact 4 technically if you go out of the way, to go from Hollywood to the base of Big Bear Mountain. I woke up at the base of Big Bear Mountain and had no idea how I got there. It's only by the grace of God that I woke up, because it is a windy mountain going up about 6,500 feet. And I do not think my brother and I would have survived had I not woken up. But I had just shifted to autopilot. I had no idea what was wrong with me, but that scared me straight. So I went to the doctor and I essentially said, Doc, I think I'm dying. I don't know what's wrong with me. This happened. It doesn't make any sense. I'm not just sleepy. It's something that I can't seem to control. I had never heard of a sleep disorder before, so I didn't know that was an option. And the doctor said, unfortunately, Rhiannon, I have to report this as a mandated reporter. I have to report this to the DMV, and now you're going to have to go fight for your license. So as you can imagine, SoCal does not have the best public transport, and instantaneously, my life was changed. Next slide. So I had to make immediate lifestyle adjustments. I had to go to see a neurologist. I had to do several sleep studies to finally get my diagnosis. And it turns out I have narcolepsy, type 1 with cataplexy. So, when you have that aha moment when you're like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? And you beat yourself up and you make excuses and you give yourself no grace. And then you have a name for it and you're like, oh, that makes so much sense. That makes so much sense. I'm not just lazy. I'm not just this. I'm not just that. There's a reason. So I started my journey with learning what narcolepsy was. And I'm still learning because, again, there is no cause or cure. Everything is guesswork. Point. I invite you to do more research if you want to learn more, or again, if you have an employee that has narcolepsy, I invite you to do your best to try to understand what they might be going through. So getting back to why I said my zombie life, this gal here is not me in the photo, but it very well could be me. When I say lifestyle changes, I don't think that unless you walk a mile in the life of someone's shoes that has narcolepsy, you could really truly understand what that looks like, because every single decision you make, you have to consider things like, can I get there? Oh, can I get home? Will I be able to stay alert while I'm there? So on and so forth. So I'm just going to walk you through a day in my life with very short bulleted points. The morning paralysis is a daily thing. Whether my body and mind agree if I'm awake or not depends on the day. This is what makes mornings very, very, very hard, which is why having a rigid work schedule doesn't work for me, because I have no control of whether I'm actually technically awake. For example, I can get up and fully function while being asleep, uh, which is where the zombie part comes in. You can call me to be my wake up partner. I've had a million of those, and we can have a conversation. You can say, get up and go flush the toilet because you think that means I'm awake. No, that just means I went and flushed the toilet, because my brain is awake enough to tell my body what to do, but I am not consciously aware of what I am doing. Or the opposite happens, to where I'm stuck in the bed and I'm screaming, get up, Rhiannon. It is time to get up. And my body is just like, no, and there's nothing I can do about it but lie there in frustration. I used to berate myself for it. Luckily, I have grown in my mental health awareness and in my self care and in my self talk. And I rarely get angry with myself anymore. But that was a big struggle. So once I can finally get up, then I do what from an onlooker might seem like, why is she doing that? Why isn't she getting ready for work? Or why isn't she, you know, doing something that seems like it has meaning? I do what I call tinkering. It isn't actually tinkering, but um, I'll make my bed, or I'll go rinse dishes, or I'll start turning on lights, or just anything to activate my body and my brain that isn't a robotic type thing, because I'm still trying to see if I'm even awake or not. This is the part where when I used to have to, I would wake up late and I'd jump up and I'd get dressed and I'd hop in the car because I had to get to work. That was dangerous. I can't do that anymore because I fell asleep on the road, nearly died, and God knows what would have happened if I had hurt others while driving while asleep unknowingly. So, where the hallucinations come in is if I have time in the end, I'll share one with you. But what I will say is it's more of a lucid dream because people don't understand how you can be awake yet not be awake. Um, and so I say dream because we don't dream. We don't sleep deep enough to actually dream. And when we do, we are in that stage of sleep for 10 minutes tops, and we come right back out. So, am I awake or not is the question of the day every single day. And whether I know if I'm awake or not is yet another question. So, there are times when I know for a fact my brain is not fully on, and I just have to express that. I have to own it and be okay with it until my brain turns on, because being angry about it doesn't turn my brain on, and being embarrassed doesn't fix it either. So, thankfully, I've grown a lot in that way. So luckily for me, after a long battle, um, because if I had to go to work, I would have to drive, right? If I could walk or have some other means, it would be different. Thankfully, now I have a reasonable accommodation where I mostly telework, because no one's life is in danger, particularly mine, if I just got to walk over and turn on my computer versus getting in the car and risking everyone's life around me. So this cataplexy part, I'll just get into briefly. Um, you might have noticed, if you've ever met me, that if it seems like my reaction emotionally isn't quite matching what you would think or what I'm expressing with my voice, it's because if I allow myself to feel extreme joy or happiness or sadness or anger, there is a probability I will fall down. And then people call the ambulance and things get all crazy, and that's just stuff I don't want in my life. So I'll be like, oh my gosh, that's great, I'm so excited. And that's the extent, and it looks like I'm in pain to say it, and it's because I'm trying to stop from feeling too much, which is unfortunate, but it's the way that I control my cataplexy, particularly when in public. So if we're ever together and you make me crack up and I kind of lean over, it's not that typical ha 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 ha, it was so funny. It's a slow fall over because I can't help it. And those are what is my extreme version of cataplexy. I'm very lucky that I don't have the knockout sessions that a lot of narcolepts have. What I do have is all day cataplexy, to where suddenly just my arms go limp or my face goes limp and I almost look like a stroke victim for a minute, and then it'll come back. And it also affects my tongue. So like Natalie was mentioning, sometimes she has a stutter. Every once in a while, I just stutter out of nowhere, and it frustrates me. But I have to remember that it's not me, it's my body misbehaving, if you will. Next slide. So just to recap of how, because I don't live in a place with good public transportation, my life is drastically reduced and small, because I can't go very far. I mean, I can, if I want to risk everyone's life and be very, wanton and willfully dangerous. Um, by default, it's my fault if I have an accident, unless there is proof that it's not. Similar to folks with epilepsy and stuff, it's noted that you are knowingly driving with a condition that can instantaneously cause you to be a danger to others. So I generally don't drive more than about 10-15 minutes one way by myself, just because I'm trying to be wise and be safe. If there's something where I'm not actively engaged like I am now and I'm sitting listening, I'm in trouble. I don't like to seem disrespectful. So I essentially have to stand all the time, which can wear on my body, but it beats accidentally falling asleep. Um, Reading is a near impossibility, like I said, but praise God for audiobooks. Relaxing is rare. A misconception is that people with narcolepsy sleep all the time. The truth is we never actually really sleep, which is why our bodies are constantly just trying to get rest. So relaxing, what I mean by that is if you get off work and you're like, oh, I'm going to go relax for 10 minutes, that's great. For me, what relaxing looks like is a possible involuntary falling asleep. So now I can't pick up my son from work, or the rest of my night is ruined and I can't get anything done that I wanted to get done. And then I blame myself for even sitting down because I had things to do and I couldn't. And lastly, school, unfortunately, which used to be one of my superpowers, has become a giant barrier. So next slide, 'cause I'm almost done. I think I might be at time. So this is just a picture of what cataplexy can look like on the left. For me, it's normally what's on the top right. I get really droopy eyes suddenly. People have asked if I'm high. People have asked if I'm drunk. My get the brain fog. I lose my words all the time. Things like that. And I just have to work through it, talk through it, and hope people don't judge me. And if they do, that says more about them than me, right? Next slide. So I'll sum it up with this. It's important if you have a disability, whether visible or not, to be a self-advocate. Nobody can advocate for you like you can, but not only that, nobody knows your experience like you do. So as comfortable as you are in sharing, in my opinion, it's best to be as open as you can. You're not looking for handouts. You're not looking for special treatment. What you are looking for is just acceptance with the boundaries that you have to create for yourself to be successful. Always have that mental health battle, right? I have to say yes to that every day, because if not, I'll be mean to myself, and that's not fair to me. Setting those boundaries. And not only that, saying yes to myself. I want to go places, but I don't know if it's a good idea. And having to deal with that communication sometimes can be frustrating, because it makes me seem aloof, right, or unsupportive, and I never want to be seen as that, because I'm not. As far as workplace goes, being open and honest with my supervisor was key. You know, I was being targeted by a former supervisor, had to go all the way to EO to stop it, but I had to have that battle, because I deserve to be treated properly despite looking, quote, normal, right? Um, and not to shame myself if I have a sleep attack at work. I have been told that I was acting like I was drunk before, and I just had to have a conversation with that person. So the next couple of slides are just slides I included for when you get the slide deck, as far as advocating for narcolepsy awareness. And the last thing I will read to you is this quote. I'll go back one slide, please. In the gray, uh, average of 8 to 15 years between onset symptom and diagnosis. Most people that have it don't know it, and it's most commonly misdiagnosed, along with other things like epilepsy, depression, and schizophrenia. So raising awareness to an issue that can appear as laziness is very, very important to me, especially because I'm one of the least lazy people that I know. And the battle that I have to go through just to get through the day can't truly be understood unless you've experienced it. And I just ask that you Be mindful of comments that you might make about others who aren't acting in a way that you think that they should. It's always best to just invite them to have a conversation. If you can skip ahead 2 slides, I'll just share there is a World Narcolepsy Day on the 22nd of September, and there is a slide in there with resources if you need more information. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Brown, for that wonderful presentation. Thank you for just bringing up, I'm sure, a very sensitive and emotional, you know, disability that you have. And thank you so much for bringing not only awareness, but just some of the misconceptions. I'll admit that I thought narcolepsy was just someone that couldn't go to sleep. And holy, holy smokes, you've really opened my eyes to what it is. But thank you so much for sharing. If we can all hold off on any questions until the end, you can put them in the chat, and then we'll try to get to those questions at the end. And now I would like to turn it over to Mr. Sherman Anderson.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Good afternoon.
Oh, sorry. I wasn't sure if I'd unmuted myself or not. So, yeah, hi, I'm Sherman. If you could hit the next slide, please. Yeah, I was just going to talk to you about my journey in life. If you could hit the next slide, please. I'm the oldest of 8. I grew up in Idaho, had great parents. Oops, let me make sure I get to my slides. I am the oldest of 8, as you can see there in the corner there of all my nieces and nephews. And then my kids are there in the middle. And one of the things I like to do on the outside when I'm not working is I love to go rowing. And that's something I picked up here in the last few years. It's really helped me a lot. My team is down in the lower right-hand corner. My parents were very wonderful people. I was diagnosed in the late 70s, early 80s with cerebral palsy. I think that was the specific diagnosis. Just got put in a bucket. That doesn't mean to sound rude or anything, but they just said, yeah, these are the symptoms you're having, and we can't really do anything about it. So go have a great life. And my parents, bless their hearts, encouraged me, and because the doctor said it ain't gonna kill him, they had the courage and the ability to not necessarily kick me out of the nest, but they sure let me do some things that looking back now with a daughter who has CP as well, I wonder about just the heartache and the difficulty of seeing, the difficulties and wanting to protect them as much as possible. But I thank God every day for my parents who are willing to expect the same from me as they would from all of my other siblings, which, isn't the same physical outcome, but the same, striving for excellence. I spent way too long thinking that I was my body. And through some long journeys and different discussions and talking with friends, I've realized that, I am not my body. It happens to be the meat puppet that I'm playing right now, but I'm not defined by CP. I'm not defined by, the lack of hair on the top of my head. It's hard sometimes, but it's truly a blessing for me. I haven't always responded this way, and if you catch me on the wrong day, I'll still get angry with myself and others. But remembering how much I'm blessed really has encouraged me to keep trying. One of the things I wanted to share was a quote from Seneca, one of the famous Stoics. He said that the test of gold is adversity, the same of strong men. I believe that is what makes our country such a great place to live, because we're not guaranteed equal outcome, but by law, by rules, by things like the ADA, we're given opportunities to push through. So I would say, drawing his play, Lou Gehrig said, said on the day he retired, or they retired his number, you know, I'm the luckiest man alive. I think, you know, how lucky, how blessed I am to be living in this time where, you know, there's adaptive sports and things that make my life better and richer. Some things I thought, you know, to be able to help people better understand where I'm coming from is, you know, I had an experience going to the Smithsonian one day, and a young man came up to me, and bless his heart, he jumped in and pushed me up the railing, and it just touched my heart, you know, because I could recognize a younger me in him. You know, he's from a small town. I don't know, doesn't really matter, but he just was so willing to help, and he had just such great love. Didn't know me, but he was very kind to reach out and help me. And I just happened to mention to the parents, I said, you know, thank you so much. One thing you might consider is, you know, not everyone's always going to be so happy to respond to such help, but don't stop trying. Don't, because, you know, the world, heaven knows we need people being willing to help each other. So that's the next thing is, you know, offer to help, and it's up to me to accept that help. And it's taken me a long time to come to terms with not having to do it all on my own, but by being willing, humble to accept those gifts of, you know, service. My life has been enriched. And a couple other ones is, you know, just be mindful of handicapped parking spaces. That sometimes I've seen people will drop in because of ease and like, well, I can do this, and you know, that's the only thing I could think of that might help make things a little easier. And then the other thing I was going to say is, knowing me as I know myself, that I'm not always the most happy, positive person. Keep asking to help. I know it's hard. I have tough days. I imagine you probably have tough days too. But you know, when I'm not always in my right mind, but hanging in there to try and help each other out and to just give a hand, or even just a listening ear, really means a lot to me. And knowing that I'm not alone really means a lot. So I thank God that every day that I've been able to work at such a great place, great employers, and thank you for being able to share about myself. And yeah, that's really all I had to share.
Thank you so much for your story, Mr. Sherman. We really appreciate it. At this time, we'll open up the floor to any questions by our senior leaders.
Hey, this is Mark. I'll jump in. I'm not sure if Miss Rooney was able to make it or not. But hey, I will just start. This is one of the most impressive panels and groupings that we have put together. And I have not had the opportunity to speak with someone with narcolepsy before. Cerebral palsy, not even in this type of setting, yes. And Natalie, to you as well. So I think for us as a team, us at CDM, this is a great opportunity. And so thank you. Thank you for taking your time out. And as several have said, thank you for sharing your stories. I will say one thing that I'm taking away just right at the outset is that you three, and I suspect your families and friends, are probably the strongest people I've ever met. One, to share your story the way you do, but just to go through your days. I think I have challenges, and I think a lot of folks do. And then there is this moment that you realize that, and Sherman, to you, thank God that for each day that we have. And I would also then add, thank God for you, Natalie and Rhiannon. So thank you all very much. This was excellent.
Thank you, sir. Now we'll open up the floor to any additional questions, or if you have anything in the chat.
Hey, Mindy and Dan, if you don't mind, we actually have some of the champions and senior leaders at the SAF DI level. Dr. Gerald Curry is on the line. I don't know if he can come off a mic and if he had anything to say. Over.
Yes, I can. I appreciate not only the conversation, but I believe this was probably one of the most impactful discussion on disability. It gave us a chance to kind of pierce into some of our leaders' lives to kind of see how disability actually impact them and the lack of awareness. You know, I like to call this differently abled instead of disability, because I believe that every person is just differently abled to do what it is that they've been tasked and assigned to do. You know, and so if the enterprise, the Air Force and the Space Force enterprise need to make adjustments to accommodate that, I believe all of us are better off. And so again, I applaud the ones that organize this event to make this happen. It really needs to be a lot more people here to hear this discussion. And so again, thank you to both the speakers, because again, I just think that was extremely impactful. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of this. Continue to lead.
Back over to you, Dan.
Thank you, sir, for that. We do appreciate it. Were there any comments in the chat, Anna? I think there was there one you had mentioned earlier? Or while she's looking for that, if anybody else has a question they'd like to come up on mic, go right ahead.
Hi,
I know
this
we're
is
at
Mindy.
time.
Oh, just real quick. This is Mindy Miller. Miss Brown, I was wondering if a service animal could ever help with someone with narcolepsy.
Thanks for asking. And I wanted to say I can't see the chat for some reason. So if you chat it to me, I didn't see it. Please message me directly. Absolutely. If I were a veteran, I could get one for free, but since I'm not, it's anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000. I don't know if I'll ever be able to get a service animal, but it is something I am attempting to try to do. It would open up my life hugely because it would be something to focus on, and the animal would be able to keep me awake while driving, and it would open up my life. Unfortunately, as with a lot of other things, money is the obstacle at this point. Thank you for asking.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Mr. Buckley, go ahead. I see your hand raised, sir. Mr. Buckley, are you still with us? Did you get booted?
I'm sorry, I was going to add just amazing stories and lives and perseverance, and add that Dr. Curry and I came from an organization that broke down many of the barriers that it had. And we had several employees when I left that had service animals, and it was amazing. And so, and I will share this. There was one, the dog's name was Colonel. It was a 135-pound Doberman Pinscher. And it's pretty exciting to start your day when the skiff door opens and this rumbling beast runs through the cube farm, says hello to the 5 or 6 people that it wants to say hello to, and then lays down. And the teammate who had that dog, she shared her story, and she suffered from seizures. This dog was trained to alert her when it sensed the seizure was coming on. Now think about, and she explained, the only way to train the dog to be able to do that is they had to induce seizures in her, on her, so they could train the dog. But she did it. And to Rhiannon's point, she was a veteran. And so it was a little bit easier to do this, but there's a lot that goes into that and beneficial. And so, ma'am, I'll ask, is Ms. Carmack, would we ask, does the Department of Defense or does the Department of the Air Force, and I'm assuming that it's been looked at, but in the same way that there are funds that are set up for other disabilities, how about service animals? What doors or availability for those types of things for non-veterans that are DoD or Air Force employees are there? Over.
Hi, this is Colonel Carroll, Deputy Director for Diversity and Inclusion, and I do not know the answer to that question, but I will definitely find out and make sure Rhiannon Brown knows, as well as this group. So thank you for the question.
Awesome, ma'am. Thank you. We appreciate that. Thank you for the question and the comments, Mr. Buckley. Always appreciated. Is there anybody else? Anybody else that would like to ask a question or share a story or a comment? I know we're over time by 3 minutes, so if you need to leave, I do understand. I just want to get everyone the opportunity to ask questions while we have the time. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead, Ms.
Can I
Brown.
just give a closing comment? Since my mentor, Dr. Curry, is here, he says a statement that has impacted me in my soul, and I always like to share it anytime I can. And he always says we're born looking like our parents, but we die looking like our choices. So if you make the choice every day to get up and give it your all, whether you suffer from a disability or not, you're winning at life. And if you make the further choice to, have that self-love and that self-care, then you're making yourself a better person to then serve others.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, ma'am. I had to write it down. Yeah, I'm doing the same thing, Anna. You just can't see me. Uh, but wow, thank you. And Dr. Curry, that's pretty awesome. That statement that you came up with. So thank you both for being part of that. With that being said, is there anyone else? Last chance for any more questions or comments? While you're thinking about it, if you want to come up on mic, just raise your hand. But this is recorded for those of you that may know anyone else that wants to view this later. It will, once the chat is compiled and stuff, it'll populate in this channel. So by all means, please feel free to share it. But if that's it and we have no more questions, I'll go ahead and hang on. I do want to thank the panelists. Thank you so much for being here with us, sharing the information and sharing your stories. Like I said, I know it takes a lot to be that vulnerable. So I do appreciate it. Ms. Carmack, did you have anything to add before I say goodbye to everyone today?
I just want to reemphasize the fact that when we bring these special guests on for these special observances, they are really bringing their true, authentic selves to the table. They're sharing vulnerabilities with us. And I hope that we are all taking this back into our workspace and into our daily lives to apply a little bit of more humanity and kindness for one another. That's a part of the meat to DEI and A. So with that said, you can do your algorithmic math after that to enhance what we are doing here. So we do have another event coming up in November or a couple of events in November for National Native American Indian Heritage Month. We will send that information out and hopefully you all can attend. But we want to thank the guests here today, Ms. Jack, Ms. Brown, and Mr. Anderson, who had to jump off because I'm sure he had to go take care of a few security details for some of us. He might have been trying to write me off on something, I'm not sure. But we want to thank you and thank you for volunteering to do this with us today. Back to you, Dan.
All right. Yep. Nope. That concludes the ceremony today, or the observance today. I do thank y'all for joining us. If you want to be part of these in the future, if you have some ideas, please get in touch with me, Ms. Carmack or Ms. Mindy Miller, and we'll by all means let you help out. These are awesome, and we can't do it without everyone that's involved, whether you're a volunteer as a panelist or you help with some of the stuff in the background. So we do appreciate it. Y'all have a wonderful day. I will hang on for just a little bit until everyone's done. And again, thank you thanks to the panelists and thanks to the CDM SPOTT team. Really do appreciate your help with these. Have a nice day, everyone.
Thanks, Dan. Well done. Thank you, Anna. Thank you all.
Hi, Dan, because I